So this is my presentation for Interactive Objects and Environments Project 2. This project focuses on developing principles and ideas from Project 1, connecting physical computing to the Internet. We will focus on making new design prototypes, interfaces, and experiences for products that are wirelessly connected to the net. While still using the Feather Huzzah, we sought to expand on what we've learned so far and continue to improve our creations and understanding of the connection between the physical and the virtual. So let's go through the previous work that we've done. So previously, for my project, I focused on creating a chess timer that allows users to mark their turns in a chess game by interacting with a switch while connected through an Adafruit feed. Unfortunately, I ran into a myriad of problems and errors on my end, and my prototype was not properly functional by the end of the project. I determined various issues that were causing this, but in the end I decided that moving forward I wanted to branch away from this a little bit. For Warren's previous project, he made a wireless controller, but it didn't work like it was supposed to either. It was supposed to have two different functions, one for each button, but ended up only working when you pressed both buttons at the same time. After knocking his head against the wall for a few days, he admitted defeat and conceded that the idea wasn't going to work with current knowledge. So together we decided to go and adapt what we've learned and move forward to create a project working together. So this is our current work. This is the Fritzing diagram for a basic circuit that we'll be using throughout this process. So we began using the Thinger guides. This is a photograph of the circuit where we have two LEDs set up to the feather that are able to turn on and off. So we set up a Thinger IO account to test having more of a threshold than Adafruit was able to provide, depending on how we wanted to work in the future with our project. We wanted to have our options open. So Adafruit caps out at a certain point, and Thinger gives more opportunity for that. We began by following the first guide. We hooked up a Thinger.io account and hooked up our feathers to the network. So I used the ESP8266 Thinger 2 LEDs code in order to connect my feather to the Wi-Fi as well as to my Thinger account. Once I had everything set up and running, I made a set of digital buttons that can be toggled on and off to light up the LEDs I have on my breadboard. After everything with Thinger was running smoothly, I went on to the Guide 2 in order to combine my feed with P5. I had a few minor errors with getting the links to work properly, but after troubleshooting with some of my peers, everything was in working order. This code is the baseline in which we decided to use going forwards. So then we moved on to the task of connecting two feathers, as I did with my previous project. So I knew that I wanted to have options going forward with my possible directions I could take. So I decided to test out using two feathers with the same feed like before in order to explore what was available. So with the assistance of Warren and his feather, we decided to get a second device up and running to the Thinger feed. So here I'll just play the brief video that can show it working. So, options for moving forward. For this project I had one of three options moving forward: to either change the direction and develop a new concept separate from Project 1, to pivot, reframe the concept against Project 1 to fit with a new hardware, software, or UX solution, or to continue using the same framework for interactions from Project 1 and developing it further. In the end, I decided to pivot somewhat for the project, still using the feather with P5 and testing out replacing Adafruit with Thinger. I changed the general idea for my prototype from a chess timer to a would you rather game, still keeping with the game theme, and I recruited Warren into joining me so that together we could work to bring two feathers into the equation. So the new concept stays in the realm of games. I abandoned the chess timer, and now it is a would you rather style game where the user is presented with two options saying would you rather, and then they would select which option they would choose. Here are some examples of similar games that exist. So visualizing the UX. This is a basic visualization that I mocked up of how the experience would work. The screen would show a question with two options. On their turn, the user would select an option, which in turn lights up the corresponding LED on the player's circuits, signaling which choice they picked. Then the next user would go on their turn, and select the next question. So our system map got quite complicated because it has to detail the levels of connection between both users as well as the circuit and digital interface. So you can see it mirrors on either side between the user interacting with their physical circuit that contains the LED. Physical circuit is connected with the Feather Huzzah, uploads the code on the Feather using Arduino, uses Wi-Fi to connect to the internet, uses feed credentials to connect to Adafruit or Thinger, uses that to connect to the P5 sketch, which is uploaded to the web using CyberDuck, onto the Firebird server which it's hosted in, and then provides the user with a front-end interface. On the interface, they can play the Would You Rather game, in which they will receive either option A or option B. Upon selecting one of those options, it would go back up to their breadboard and light up the LED on click. So these are just some materials we use. We use the Feather and we use the LED. Of course, we had breadboards and wires, but these were the main things that we ended up being required for our project. So like before, we did some code research ahead of time using the P5JS website that had tutorials available to reference possible options for working on the project, and I compiled them in a document to reference later. This is the code from the P5JS website that I ended up using as a starting point for the Would You Rather game. I used the basic function for making a quote generator and then adapted it for our P5 sketch. So we began with making a prototype. This is the prototype we've built so far. The actual game part is functional, and we're currently working on getting both feathers to operate with our new code. We will do this by continuing to adapt the web to feather example and refine the final prototype for Project 3. Here you can see there is the basic version made with just HTML and JavaScript, and then we added some CSS for a basic preview of how the app would function.